Welcome to PowersSquared Raw and Real. I'm MA Powers.
And I'm JL Powers.
We happen to be together. We're in El Paso, Texas.
Yes, our hometown.
Our hometown, yeah. This is where we grew up. In fact, we are broadcasting live from my old room. So,
yes.
Right, and actually where the computer is sitting right now is where my older brother used to sleep, and I used to sleep upstairs, which I'm not going to show you.
Oh.
So.
Yeah, it's a mess with Legos and stuff. It's the playroom now.
Yeah, well, that's kind of a mess anyways, But anyways, so this week we're going to talk a little bit. We stopped last week.
We're drinking whiskey lemonade.
Right. Well, we are in Texas.
Yes.
And it's 5 o'clock somewhere.
That's right. Not in Texas.
It's not in Texas. It's, right. Neither in Maine. Not even in Atlantic time. Darn it.
That's okay.
In Iceland.
In Iceland. There we go.
So last week we ended our discussion of religion and writing with kind of the bombshell of you moving in with your boyfriend, which pretty much said to everybody that you were no longer orthodox in any way, shape, or form. So let's talk a little bit about that, why that would be. There may be people who view this who
are like, what the heck?
What the heck? Well, what do you
would that be
of
such
course.
A big deal?
So let's talk a little bit about that and maybe,
sure. Yeah.
So.
Well, I definitely was taught, and we were taught, and this was a big part of Christian evangelical culture, that you reserved sex for marriage. And I was never a part of the purity movement in that sense. There were all of these purity movements within evangelical culture where people pledged to be virgins until they were married, and maybe even to not even kiss or anything like that. Sometimes they'd get a ring.
And they'd wear the WWJD bracelet.
Mm-hmm. And I think I was a little bit on the older end of that. So I think that came in probably, I went to college young. So maybe if I had...
You would have gotten right on the very first cusp of it, whereas I was on the start of it, kind of in my formative years, but it got more so.
Yeah, it got pretty bad. But I was not really part of that. But nevertheless, I understood that this was a big sin, and it was a life-changing sin, and it was something that you just didn't do.
Yeah, and I would say that this was a particular, having sex before marriage is I would say that is the sin of sins, basically, within the evangelical culture. I can't...
Well, adultery would be worse, probably.
Yeah, that's true. Adultery would be worse.
As bad as it is to have sex before marriage, then to have sex with somebody who wasn't your spouse after you were married is probably worse. Maybe.
I don't know, because that's pretty
So sex before marriage.
I don't know.
Pretty common.
It is, but it was like hush hush, right? Hush hush. I would say it's even probably more common, but it was so it's I don't know. Anyways, it's a pretty big up there.
Definitely there was a sense in which you would ruin your life.
Right. It wasn't just that it was a sin, but that it was life altering.
Right. And to go back in time, remember, my first boyfriend and I, when I first started college, I was unprepared to be in a romantic relationship and deal with, the kind of pressures of sexuality within a relationship. And I had a relationship with somebody who was manipulative and really worked hard to override my lack of consent and kind of push me into a place that I didn't want to. And that had put me in a place where I was just I didn't want to have sex ever again. I didn't think I ever wanted to be married. It had been such a horrific, painful experience. Mom didn't know what had happened to me, but she was worried. She called the college. This was back when I was 16. She called the college to find out what would happen if her daughter needed to be taken out of school immediately, because she didn't know. She thought I was going to have a meltdown I think I was dealing with some things that were typical of sexual assault victims, right? even though I wouldn't have been able to call it sexual assault.
Sure.
Exactly. I mean, at that time,
Right.
I didn't know how to characterize it. So I had been like very, you know, I had been in one long-term relationship with a boy who, you know, was very kind and was also religious after that. And he did, you know, never pressured me or anything. And in fact, wanted to save himself for marriage too. So there wasn't any issue there. And so although I had a relationship
Right.
post that in college, it had been, you know, very chaste relationship in many ways. And so then when I kind of began to leave the culture and started dating and getting involved with men in a way that wasn't how I had been taught was right.
Right.
And then I kind of, yeah. and I will say that like in many ways I felt at the time that getting into a long-term relationship, because I did start, you know, getting sexually involved with some of the men that I was dating. And so then to get involved with someone, I fell head over heels in love with this young man who was a college student, a little bit older than me, but I was a grad student. He was an undergrad, and we fell head over heels in love, and it felt like a relief in another way because I didn't feel like I was navigating those relationships very well. The other ones, you know, in terms of, you know, sex. Mm-hmm. And because I didn't have any background in how to deal with those things in a healthy way. And so, so when we really fell in love and he was like, well, how do you feel about moving in together? I knew it was going to be a bad thing, not the moving in together, but like bad in terms of telling our parents and people in the Christian culture. And I really dreaded it. It was one of the most painful conversations I've ever had in my life to tell mom that I was moving in with somebody. I mean, hands down, probably one of the most, it's up there in the top, like 2 or 3.
Yeah. And reactions, tell us a little bit about people's reactions.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I feel like most of the Christians that I knew basically at that point decided that they couldn't be friends with me anymore. And in fact, I had one person who actually kind of defied her husband and said, I'm going to keep being friends with Jessica. Yeah. That's, you know, this was a person in YWAM who was in the ministry, and she just said, he tried to put his foot down and say, you can't be friends with Jessica anymore. And she said, no, I will be. Right. And she's one of, you know, the very few people that I'm like, yep, still within the Christian world that I like have total love for. And, but that was, I honestly, I don't know what people's reactions were because I just got cut off like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was like at that point.
Do you feel, I'm just curious, like, do you think it was one-sided or do you think it was a two-sided kind of cutting off?
Right.
Like from
it was probably two-sided.
I'm just curious.
Yeah, I'm sure it was two-sided. It wasn't like I was calling people up and saying, please.
Right.
I mean, by that point, I had.
But I can understand why, because
I had discovered the rumors going around about me being demonic.
Right.
I had discovered the rumors going around that I was a lesbian. Like these things had been coming up. It had been over a year that I had heard about those things. Right. A year and a half since those rumors had. Right. And that nobody in that community had ever apologized or said, well, that was really sucky on our part.
Right.
Like, yeah, that was really sucky for us to spread those rumors and not ever come tell you that these things were being said or, you know, or like be a friend to you.
Yeah.
Like, that was pretty sucky on their part. Let's just put it that way. So that had been a year and a half that I had known about those rumors and had it come up in from several different places and been like, what, you know, and nobody in that community, nobody in YWAM, nobody in the, you know, Christian communities that I was in came and really, reached out to me about that and said, wow, people are really misbehaving here and being
right.
like
or be like, yeah, I've heard this. What's going on?
Yeah.
Yeah. Why would
is
they
it
do
true?
That? Right,
Are you a lesbian?
Right. Awkward. So, but I think, yeah, I mean, it's hard. I don't know. It is hard to be honest. It just is.
It is. That would have been hard, I'm sure.
Yeah.
For people
not
to
that I'm just saying no, exactly. And I'm not making any excuses whatsoever. And so
I
you
think
were
it was
already
two-sided, but I had begun to, kind of separate myself, and so it wasn't like I was calling people in the community and saying, "Hey, I'm moving in with a boyfriend." I mean, I had already really started to separate myself to a degree of where I felt like they had written me off, and that was more confirmation of it.
Sure.
And again, yes, am I partly responsible for that? Sure, I could have started calling.
Right, but I think here's the thing: we have within the evangelical Christian community at the time, and I'm assuming still to this day, there's no healthy way to have a good relationship with people for the most part in those situations, because it's basically like, well, you are living in sin, right? And so how can I, and you need to come back to our side of things. And if you don't, then you're going to go to hell. So it's just a really difficult thing to be like, no, I'm going to be friends anyways in that situation. Right. And to just be like, I don't care. Like,
or maybe I care, but I care about you more.
Exactly. I care about you more than whatever it is that people think or some sin that's in your life. And I think that's, there's an uncommon person to perceive sin, right?
Right.
Perceive sin, but it's an uncommon person to get past that and be like, no, I'm gonna be for somebody.
Yeah, they're my friend, and I love them. And
and
two things. One is that one of the people that really stuck by with me that was my best friend in college, and we went through a bad period where we were hardly talking to each other, which I discussed.
Yes.
And then we became friends again, and she stuck with me through all that. And we're best friends today, and she's a sister to me, and we're not on the same page about an awful lot of beliefs or anything like that, but she still loves me throughout it. And she told me one time, your mom came to me and said, thank you for still being Jessica's friend.
Right.
And because other people weren't.
Right.
Yeah. And I'm going to start crying. That's horrible. But she was like, why wouldn't I? Why wouldn't I still be her friend?
That's, I mean, we understand that because we that's how people function. Like that was the culture that we functioned in. Is people would cut you off.
They would cut you off. And so, that was actually the second point I was going to make. Sorry. That's still emotional, but you were taught, this is biblical. There's that story, and I forget exactly where it is, but you'll remember. But if your brother sins, you go and you confront him.
Exactly. Yeah.
And if he doesn't repent, you bring the elders of the church to confront him. And if he still doesn't repent,
then you cut them off.
Right.
Yeah, and it's the same, and the idea of the, like, if people don't listen to you, you wipe the sandals off your feet, and move on, like, and go somewhere else. So yeah, there's that. That's a strong culture.
And I mean,
movement.
Nobody did the coming to confront me in my sin either, right?
That's true. No,
they just cut me off.
They just cut you off. They went right to the cutoff.
Right. And so, there's that too.
I mean, there is that.
They didn't even go through the process of, saying we still really care about you. But that's a, I do see that as a problem within that culture anyway, because it's basically like, you either agree with me that this is sin, and you conform to the standards that we've set, or the repercussions are you're out of the community. You're not part of the community. And so you know, in a community where the rules are few,
yeah,
it's perhaps manageable. But in some of these very fundamentalist and very evangelical communities, the rules become stricter and stricter and stricter.
right,
You know, where it's really hard to conform, and you're
right, yeah,
you know,
no, it's hard. Yeah. So the fallout from that, and you then moved.
yeah. So we moved in together,
Yeah.
and that was so painful. I mean, it was not painful. Like, I really
The move-in
loved
wasn't.
the move-in wasn't painful.
Right, it was
I mean, the
birth was
relationship wasn't completely healthy, in that we didn't really know how to be in a healthy relationship, like communicate. You know,
yeah, exactly.
How to communicate and how to. And I was going through so much that he couldn't possibly understand,
Right,
because he didn't come from that background,
right.
and he didn't understand what I was going through in terms of being cut off from this community that had been all my life, you know.
Right.
And in fact, his mom said to me when I mentioned she gave us a, you know, housewarming gift or whatever, and I was like, oh, thank you so much, and I said, you know, I'm not going to get anything like a housewarming gift from my parents.
Yeah.
And she said,
well, why not?
Well, why not? Yeah. And I was like, well, you know, as far as they're concerned, I'm, you know, living in sin, and if I was getting married, that'd be different. They'd give me a wedding gift or whatever. But and she was like, well, don't they see this like getting married? I mean, she was just like, she was confused, you know. She was just like, but you know, I was going through so much that I couldn't possibly communicate with him, that he couldn't understand. So I was in a great deal of emotional pain.
And I'm just curious, what were you thinking about, like, God and like religion in general at this time, through all this pain? Like, what were you, was there any, like, I'm just curious, like, what were you thinking about all of that? But, or was that just put aside?
No, it wasn't put aside. I was in so much angst about my relationship with God at this time. I knew that the culture of evangelical Christianity was not one in which I could thrive, or that I felt was true. And true in a capital T or a lowercase t, right? I mean, I definitely felt like it was, you know, a damaging culture. But I didn't know at that point. I still wanted to believe. I still wanted Christianity to be true. I still wanted all of that, but I was also opening myself up to all the possibilities that maybe it wasn't. And so I remember I started reading, I think her last name is pronounced Pagels, although Pagels works too, but Elaine Pagel's books on the Gnostic Gospels, and seeing again the history of how Christianity was formed and Orthodoxy was formed, which I think is important. Because they're separate, right? And to see how, like, the early church decided these books are acceptable within the canon, and these books are considered unorthodox. Although many early Christians embraced some of these other texts, which included other stories about Jesus that are not included in the Gospels and things like that. And so reading about how orthodoxies formed within church, how theology formed within church, it didn't mean that I felt like Christianity wasn't true, but it widened it as a, maybe it's not true with a capital T, but it could be true with a lowercase t, that it can be a community where people can thrive in, and that it can be a helpful and good community, but not clearly not for me, at least here in this time. But I still wanted it to be true, and I still prayed a lot. I went and visited. We have an aunt and uncle in California who are you know, evangelical Christians, but they seemed a lot more open to, you know, me as a person, as a human being who was stumbling along and trying to, you know, find my way. And so I went and visited them a couple of times, and you know, that was very helpful, although it didn't ultimately make me embrace things either. What I did do, we moved to New York together. I started graduate school in African history in Albany, New York. And I was still kind of deeply, I mean, it was just a daily angst. I was still journaling. And those journals were kind of half prayer and half journals about my very real struggles to find something to replace what I had had.
Right. Yeah.
Because I had had something that even while it was dysfunctional,
right.
it was a community.
Mm-hmm.
And even though it was problematic for me and felt stifling,
mm-hmm.
it was still a community.
And it also had emotional, like, it has an emotional high to it that it's hard to replace. And I think that's what people don't understand, is that there are emotional highs within certain strains of evangelical Christianity, or just Christianity in general, that somebody who's never been exposed to that will understand the type of like dopamine rush you can get from the certain types of community and the certain types of activities that you do, because it's so emotionally meaningful for you at the time, and it's so hard to lose that.
Right.
How do you replace that? Because there isn't a it's hard.
There's no there really, like, short of converting to something else, which I did explore. I looked into Judaism. I went to actually here in El Paso, there's a sort of I forget the branches of Judaism at the moment. Like, it's not coming into my brain, but it will later. But it's one of the more kind of liberal branches of Judaism. And I went to a couple of Shabbat meetings, 3 or 4, with a woman that I knew in the English department who was Jewish, and she had converted to Judaism because of marrying. And I went to a Jewish Christian organization also here in town, here in El Paso, a couple times. And I mean, beyond looking at Judaism, I didn't really flirt with other things, because it didn't, Islam didn't seem to make sense to me. It didn't have any kind of cultural or emotional resonance to me. Buddhism, same thing. Right. In fact, I went and sat one time, and I was so bored. Right. My back hurt the entire time, and all I could think of was my back hurts. Like, could we just? Yeah, you're trying to sit there and meditate, and all you're thinking of is my back really hurts. Like, could we not have something to lean against? Like, I might get into this if I could lean against something.
You lazy Westerner, you.
I know.
Take it in and then let it out. Take it in, the pain, and then let it out.
No, it didn't work. I was trying anyway. So, I just, like, nothing actually felt culturally authentic to me other than a version of Christianity. Right. So I moved to New York, and then my relationship with my boyfriend ended suddenly, and he moved back to El Paso. And at that point, I started going to an Episcopalian church for a while. It was kind of like this sense of, all right, my attempt at rebellion didn't work.
Time to see if my attempt to coming back will work.
Yeah, let's see if coming back will work. Yeah. And so I went to, there was a great downtown Episcopalian church in Cathedral in downtown Albany. And I went there for, a few Sundays, maybe a month or so of Sundays. And then I started exploring the idea of becoming Catholic, because to me, the Catholic Church felt big enough to hold my doubts and my...
And it is, in a way, because it's so it is such a massive organization, and there's so many people, and the difference between Catholicism and evangelicalism is nobody's gonna really care much
if you hold unorthodox beliefs,
right? Or also if you move in with your boyfriend, the priest will be like, that's against religious teaching, and you'd be like, oh, it is, and they'd be like, yeah, it is. Oh, okay, all right, we'll see you at mass.
They're not gonna cut you off.
No, right? They're just like, we'll see you at mass. Basically, that was.
Yeah, they're not gonna. They're not gonna
There's
say
like
you
almost
can't
nothing that I can think of that, except for maybe divorce, that people really get up in arms about in the Catholic Church, which is a whole nother.
Well, I mean, they get up in arms about a number of things, like abortion.
Exactly.
let's not.
But like,
I mean, it's
no, for sure.
It's not this laissez-faire community at
sure
all, which
not.
is in fact
sure
why
not.
I ended up.
For sure,
not
it just
being
depends
Catholic,
on which congregation you go to, also.
Right, but I went through the RCIA, Rites of Christian Initiation for Adults, and I was confirmed as a Catholic. And all the while I was doing it, I knew in my head that I didn't necessarily, I wasn't embracing Catholicism because I believed it was the one true church.
Right.
I wasn't embracing Catholicism because I really knew for sure that Jesus was the Son of God. And but it was this sense of, I need something. I feel bereft.
Right.
I cannot overemphasize how difficult it is to leave the oftentimes warm and loving community that you were born and raised in.
Right.
It's a community of faith that's there for you. That, you know, if when we were growing up, if somebody in the church had an emergency, like the, you know, mom went into the hospital suddenly, there'd be meals for that family for the rest of
the week, maybe the month.
Maybe the month. Yeah. That the pastor was going to be there with you in the hospital in the middle of the night. There are things about that you just don't ever find in. I have not found. I found with friends, yes, with individual friends. I have found. I definitely have individual friends who are completely non-religious, who would absolutely be there in the middle of the night if there was an emergency, who would absolutely, but as a community that's sort of grounded in you know, this discrete space, which is a church building, that's not the only place of the community, but it is a real, you know, linking factor is a building where people come and gather, and then they go out and they have their friendships, and but you've got a leader who is there to help you solve problems that come up, emotional, legal, physical. You know, I mean, it's a community, and it's really hard to replace that. So I wanted something, you know, and the Catholic Church isn't it. I mean, it just doesn't have it. The Catholic Church, I know there are people in Catholicism who found some similar communities like what we had in the evangelical church, but I never saw any entry point into anything like that, like what I had.
No, I think the closest thing would probably be like would be a convent or a monastery, quite frankly. And then you have to be a part of that community, and as a lay person you can be involved and you can be a member, but you're not part of the community like the people who are there living, the nuns and the priests who are there living. Anyways, sorry. So yeah, I would agree with that, but that's part of the reason why it's both like any community you go into like that, it's great because they don't get up in your business, but then you also don't have the community that you get. Right. So exactly. So it's great and not great.
It's great and not great, right? And maybe part of the strength of
I only say this because I also converted to Catholicism along my journey, which I might come to. That's why I'm interjecting here, even though it seems maybe totally irrelevant. And I'm not defending the Catholic Church because
neither one of us is Catholic now.
Right. So but we're just not defending. So there you have it. Okay, maybe a little, but for specific reasons.
Right.
Not for the entirety of the thing.
Right.
Just as a counterpoint. All right. So continue.
Yes. All right. So, you know, I guess to get back to that too is that it just occurred to me, of course, that one of the things that we love or that I missed about the evangelical church and love about it is that deep sense of community, and that goes part and parcel with being up in one's business because it's like a family, right? And that's the way families are. And so I guess the only thing that could possibly be similar to the church that I have found in life is a family.
And but for us, that's not applicable in a lot of ways because besides our nuclear family, we didn't grow up near any family. Our ties with our extended family are so minimal compared to a lot of people that I know that it's almost laughable.
But we grew up in a Latino community, a Mexican community, where like the ties are so strong and amazing.
And like when you have a family get together, you're gonna have like 25, maybe 50 people show up. So it's not the same. Like if we had a family gathering, it'd be 5 of us.
Right.
And then we had like maybe 2 in our whole entire life of like family reunions, and they were on mom's side.
Right.
That was it.
Yeah. Well, on Dad's side, there was Grandma and Grandpa's 50th wedding anniversary in South Dakota.
Right.
We went to that, and that.
Yeah, I was so young. I don't
I was like 5 or
and
6.
Then at Grandpa's funeral, it was like gathering, and I'm sure Grandma's funeral, I wasn't able to go to that. So.
And I didn't go to Grandpa's because I was in the middle of the semester. But anyway, but I will say, I mean, that I do feel like family comes close to.
Sure.
You know, I do know that I do have what I gave up in the Christian church. I do have with Mom and Dad and you and our, Eric and everything. For example, here we are in Texas because I'm going to Frankfurt.
Right.
And so you came out to help watch Nesta because I don't have anything in California, and Chris's work schedule is so much, and so here we are.
And our parents are not great at this specific moment, even
in optimal health. Mm-hmm.
So
right, but I mean the point is that I do actually feel like I have that with the family, but that's the only thing that is similar to.
Right. So you were in New York. You converted to Catholicism. It didn't take.
It never took.
Right.
It really never took. I got married. I married a man who grew up Catholic and converted to evangelical Christianity, and then kind of it all fizzled out for him a little bit. Right. And I mean, out of respect for him, I don't want to say a whole lot about that, but from my perspective only, I really loved him. We had an amazing connection and ability to talk, but the marriage didn't work, and that ended in my late 20s. And we got married like literally right after I became Catholic, and we just never. We did get remarried again because we first got married, and then we got married again in the Catholic Church, like a year later or 8 months later or something like that. Because I still sort of wanted to be Catholic. I still wanted this community. I wanted something. I wanted faith. I wanted, and he was still much more kind of Christian than I was, but. And he was cool with becoming Catholic again. Right. If that was what it took, it was no skin off his nose. But our marriage ended, and so we talked earlier today about some of the most difficult conversations, and that one would be up there, right?
Right. Number 2.
That might be number 1, but
I know.
Yeah, I do. I know you know. So, and it really kind of felt, it felt fucked, like up, because I left the church and I moved in with a boyfriend, and that relationship didn't work. And I got married. I became Catholic.
That
didn't work. I got married. That didn't work. I'm ending my 20s at the end of my rope. Like, should I still am I really, really wrong in everything? And
you're not being blessed? Is that what you mean?
No, I never. No,
I'm just curious. You never came back. I know, because we never really believed that. But that's a strong thing in our culture. Is like you go off the straight and narrow and what God has called for you, and then your life falls apart. But the problem with that is everybody's life falls apart.
Everybody's life falls apart. Yeah, everybody has crises.
Even the people who are like that on.
And I had seen enough. I had seen enough in YWAM and the church to know it wasn't like the fact that my marriage was failing. That was me, and because I wasn't a Christian.
Right, exactly.
No, I had seen enough. I had seen enough. I knew.
Right.
I knew.
You just have to look around.
Yeah.
You don't even have to scratch the surface. You just have to look.
You're like, okay, yeah. So I knew there were plenty of people within evangelical Christianity they were keeping it together barely.
Right.
And that, or on the surface.
Right.
They were presenting this, front. And that's not to say that there weren't plenty of people that were happily married and had great families within that. But I just knew.
Just like anywhere.
Just like anywhere. But I knew that the fault didn't lie entirely, at least, with the fact that I was no longer an evangelical Christian.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Right.
But I did have to wonder,
is there something wrong with me?
Is there something wrong with me? And not to put too fine a point on it, I was sexually abused when I was 8, and I'm not blaming everything on that, but you begin to think, was that my fault too? I mean, because you always feel like those things are your fault. Right. When it happens to you, and then in the ensuing years, there's always this thought of, is there something wrong with me?
I know. Yeah. Well, but that's the cornerstone of how we grew up. That is the cornerstone of how we grew up.
There is something wrong with you.
There is something wrong with you, because if you don't believe there's something wrong with you, then why would you need Jesus, right? And so that's a core principle, and you either have to find it if you don't see it, or it's out there and you know it, but the whole, and I don't know, I saw the whole culture around that, I feel, can be destructive for people, including myself, because there's whole memes about stuff like, well, God, no, it's really not true that God says he won't give you more than you can handle. He'll give you more than you can handle, so that you have to trust him. And so in the back of your mind, you're always thinking, is my life falling apart so that somehow I realize what a horrible person I am, and then trust God? And that is it, and then you're saying, I have to trust somebody who will do something horrible in my life to make me trust him. That is gaslighting on a level that is really not good. Why would you have a loving God do something horrible to you so that you will turn to him? I know that's not what they say. They say, well, God's just letting this
do it to you.
Right, you chose it, or letting it happen. But
or life happens,
but how
it can help precipitate.
If God created everything, so I think it's hard. You're splitting real hairs, and some people can do that and believe it. But it was just too many hairs to split for me. But anyways, sorry.
Yeah, no. I mean, all of those thoughts and many more, of course, went through my head. And all I know is the last few years of my 20s and the first couple of years of my 30s, I mean, there was so much pain most of my 20s were painful because of leaving the church and then the destruction of my marriage.
Right.
And that really hurt. And it took me a number of years to go beyond merely feeling that it was all my fault, since I was the one who left and I was the one who ended the marriage, to go beyond moving solely from the mea culpa, to this realization of anger that actually had I been in a healthier state, I would have realized that the person that I married wasn't actually ready emotionally and mentally and to be an equal partner.
Right, exactly.
And
using a biblical term.
Right. Sorry. You want a partner, and you want a partner that you can rely on in all of these different ways.
Yeah, exactly. And somebody wasn't emotionally able to be that partner at that time.
Right. And to get angry about that, and to realize to get angry both at him, but also at, my own lack of there's in many ways a fairy tale at the heart of evangelical Christianity. Mm-hmm. And the fairy tale says that the most important thing, maybe even more important than, your salvation by Jesus, is to grow up and find the one and get married and have a family. And once you, find the one, you know, everything's going to be okay. Sure, there's little ups and downs,
Mm-hmm.
but I can see you don't necessarily find that. But I think for women, there's this belief that God has chosen somebody for you.
Right. Yeah,
And
that's right. That is right.
You know, single women
right.
and childless women, single, unmarried women and childless women in the church are second-class citizens.
Right.
Maybe not in 2018. I haven't been involved in the church in a long time.
Right.
I hope that that's changed. I doubt that it's changed in a lot of congregations. But when I was growing up, there was definitely this sense of, now that wasn't, Mom never put that on me ever.
Right.
Mom always said, you don't have to get married. It's okay. It's okay. You don't have to get married. Now, that doesn't mean that
I guess I never thought, I mean, you're saying what you're saying totally resonates. I understand that, but I never and it resonates with me because I know so many people who are not evangelical who are like, so, you know, if you ask, which it's a personal thing, and I don't know why you'd ask, but you do, because we're weird and we do weird stuff. I do. I'm like, hey, you're gonna have kids? I'm like, no, why would I have kids? Like, that would never, like, it's a shameful thing to be like, no, I would never have kids. Why would you want to have kids? But I mean, in the secular culture that I know, that's not a weird thing. It's not strange. That's not.
But in the Christian church, your highest ideal, I mean,
is to raise godly kids.
Is to raise godly kids and to be a godly wife, and a godly husband. And, you know, I definitely had it explained to me multiple times that women weren't lesser in the church at all. In fact, the most important role you could possibly have is to be a mother, like the most important role. And I don't even necessarily disagree with that. Like, I think being a mother or father is a pretty important role. We're raising future citizens
of the world. Right.
And that's really pretty damn important when you think about it. Like, you cannot underestimate the importance of that. So I don't disagree with that, but I don't think that answers the fundamental problem of this, you know, imbalance of roles and women as lesser citizens and lesser in the church. And ultimately, I think, it sells you on this fairy tale that God's best for you is to grow up and be married and have a family. And when you found the one,
that godly man,
that godly man,
that knight in shining scripture,
you will, you know, yes, there will be hard times, but you will.
It's going to be way harder and almost impossible if you don't.
Yeah. And so, I don't know, I feel like I've gone off on a big tangent, and I don't know where I was going with all of this, except to say that my marriage failed.
You were struggling.
I was struggling.
In your early 30s.
In my late 20s, early 30s, to make sense of the fact that of trying to carve out different expectations for myself, which I had basically been doing for a decade.
Right.
You know, I started leaving the church at 22, 23.
But there's
early 30s.
Subconsciously boiling into consciousness, right? And over the years.
Yeah, no, you build on things. You build on things. So I'm sure in 20 years, my perspective will be totally different. We'll need to redo this whole series. We'll probably be rabid Christians again. No, I'm just kidding. No, like you build on layers of understanding, and you come into that, and you start waking up. I wrote this essay when I was 18 for a college class. It was called Waking Up.
Yeah.
And it had nothing to do with religion, but it was about, you know, I remembered, I went deep into, it was nonfiction, and it was my memories of kind of waking up as a child and becoming conscious of little things like, you know, when people left the room, they didn't cease to exist.
Right.
Or the people that I knew, when they weren't in my house or at school with me, they still had their own lives and their own things were happening to them.
Right.
They didn't only exist when they were with me.
Right.
And this sort of slowly unfolding consciousness of the world as completely separate from me.
Right.
And I don't think I'm done with that process.
No, right. No, it's true. We're all the center of the universe. Right?
Right, absolutely.
There's 6 billion plus people. We're all the center of the universe.
Right. 8 billion, isn't it? 8
Is it
billion?
8 now?
I think so.
I don't know. Somebody can correct us.
Yeah. So, I don't know if I should continue beyond that, because it feels a little amorphous after that. Like, I don't feel like I've ever in my 30s have resolved anything.
That's because there's no creed, right? There's nothing that you can sit down with somebody and be like, I believe in Jesus, God's only Son. I believe, I believe in God the Father, the maker of all heaven and earth. Right. There's no creed when you move that. It's not like, I mean, there are creeds, but they're more like, I believe in free markets, or I believe in socialized medicine, but they're not like this light. They're like a.
It's not a faith.
It's not a faith. Yeah.
And so
people would argue differently, right?
Well,
that it is a faith. You have to have faith that it isn't happening. But I'm just like, okay. All right, that's true. All right, whatever. It takes a lot more belief to believe something you can't see than to not believe something you can't see. I don't know if that makes sense, but like, it's a lot easier just to be like, well, I've never seen Sasquatch.
Right.
I've never seen it. I don't believe it exists. It takes a lot more faith to be like, that Sasquatch exists. He's out there. It just does. Like, yes. It's never been proved that Sasquatch does not exist, because you cannot prove a negative. And that's what science comes in and is like, whatever, that's just a stupid argument.
Right.
Like, it's stupid. Because you can't prove a negative.
God doesn't exist.
You cannot prove it. And science is just like,
that he exists.
Right. And so science is just like, that is the dumbest argument I've ever heard. Because, like, of course you can't. Like, why would you? It's not a matter of faith there. I'm not having faith that God doesn't exist. I'm just saying, like, there's no proof. Like that's a not. So, but that's coming into my story there, right? Because of my experience as a scientist and so forth.
I mean,
and it has nothing to do with people who believe in God. Like, I don't think there are very many smart people who believe in God, and I don't want to get into me. I absolutely do not believe that if you believe in God, you're any less smart than somebody who does. That is an absolute, I absolutely don't. So I don't want to get in there, and I don't want to make fun of people who do believe in God. That's not my point. I'm just saying some of the arguments just didn't make sense to me anymore, to me personally, and that's why I don't follow those arguments. It's not that I don't necessarily not believe in God either anymore.
And I'm in the same kind of place. It's like, well, I don't not believe in God, but I don't believe in God either. Like, I just don't know. Right. I wrote a number of blog posts in my 30s about leaving the church and I had a student write to me one time, a Stanford student who had been my student, and he had really been enjoying reading my blog, and he grew up in a completely secular household, but he was dating a Catholic and going to church, and he told me, he was like, I feel like I'm picking up a foreign language and I'll never be fluent in it.
Right. Yeah, I know.
And that really struck me. Nesta, I was maybe pregnant with Nesta at the time. And it struck me. And I've always kept that in my head, where how you balance that as a parent, where I don't necessarily have a strong faith that this is the truth, but I want to raise Nesta with the possibility, right? I want him to have the language of possibility there, and not like this complete, that's not even on my radar. I don't even understand why you would even be concerned about issues of spirituality. Like, I want that to be a component to his being, but without forcing anything on him, or without having him think that this is the way because my mom is teaching me this. But it always stuck with me, my students' comment about, I feel like it will always be a foreign language that I will never be fluent in. And so figuring that out for how I parent my child.
Yeah, I feel that way when I have some friends, and they're great people who are very, into Eastern, like, westernized Eastern type religion and meditation and reading dreams and chakra stuff and all this stuff, and it's a total foreign language to me. So I can understand that. Like I don't get it, and I'm not sure what they're saying, because there's levels of meaning when they say something that, just like in evangelical Christianity, there's a whole language there that when you say something, like,
there's a lot.
I mean, the
the
biggest one that we can say is, like, if you tell somebody secular, I'm saved because I'm washed in the blood of the Lamb, they look at you like that is disgusting, because there's like what the hell are you talking about? Like, where does that come from? But that's a very specific religious phrase that is used, like,
and it's packed
all
with
the time. Symbolic meaning, right?
Yes.
It's, it's talking about Jesus. It's talking about his sacrifice. The whole idea that God demands blood. You have sinned. Now you must be washed in blood, or I cannot look at you. So yeah, there's that. The bloodthirsty God, which is who demands
a sacrifice.
Demands a sacrifice and cannot
to pay for that sin.
So. You better get washed in that blood, and that blood is Jesus, which is bizarro thinking about too, because of course it's not real in any.
Yeah, it's all symbolic.
It's all symbolic. Yeah. And so, but as for somebody else, that's a foreign language. It really is,
Yeah. Yeah.
And the whole idea of, like, what would Jesus do? That's a whole that has so many connotations to it that, like, even somebody who knows a lot about the New Testament but is not within the evangelical sphere would be like, well, Jesus would probably be a socialist, but that's like anathema to a lot of American Christianity. It's like, no, being a Christian means that you are a capitalist, even if they don't say it outright, right. and so like. That whole, there's a language that they use that has so many levels of meaning that if you don't grow up in it, I think it is difficult, because it's a symbolic language, because there's nothing real tangible to it. Mm-hmm. That's why it makes it even harder probably than a real language in a lot of ways.
Yeah. I mean, I think to get back to what I was saying, I don't know that I don't have any angst anymore. I mean,
yeah, obviously I do, but I'm working through it.
Maybe some, occasionally. Right. I'm not saying there's no angst ever, anytime.
Right,
there's pain still, obviously. Mm-hmm. But, and I'm still in relationships with a lot of people that are, right. deep believers, and so right. there's that too, and I have a lot of respect for them. So I wouldn't say, I guess I feel like that the need to find answers to it has sort of slowly dissipated or fizzled right. out. I still have so many questions about the human condition and about the world and about right. why are we so prone to violence?
Right, right.
Why is rape so common?
Right.
Why is poverty such a prevalent problem, and why are people not more concerned about it? I mean, I have right. lots of questions about the human condition that could be answered religiously, sure, if I was right. a person of faith, but that's not where I'm seeking my answers. And so I still have lots and lots of questions right. that niggle at the brain and that I think right. about a lot, and discuss with Nesta when he asks questions. Mm-hmm. But I will say that the deep angst over it all has kind of dissipated, and I'm sort of able to look at, for example, evangelicals supporting Trump and just be like, don't understand why, but it doesn't bother me personally. Right. It's like, well, I don't feel this strong,
right.
sense of need to really even worry about it too much.
Right. Yeah, no, I can see that. I find
there's a strong support for Trump among evangelicals. Okay, let's find the threads for that. This is why. Right. Okay, I understand it intellectually, but I don't have any emotional attachment to it anymore.
Yeah, I guess I did.
I've been out of the church for so long that
I see now more. It's I bring it up because it's actually funny to me. Like, it's because whenever you take something to an extreme, that's humor. And so I just like, this is an extreme. And so it's hilarious to me that you would have this guy who's so on a personal level lives in such a way that's anathema to the culture I grew up with, being supported by 83% of white evangelicals, that it makes me laugh. Like inside,
not laughing at them.
No,
like,
not at
wow,
all.
this is
Just
really,
is like so like, yeah, it's like you take opposites. I mean, that's humor, right? The taming of the shrew, you take opposites and put them together, and it's humorous. You know, it's funny, right. And so you have this to the worlds colliding, and it's like that ultimate, like humoristic, like intersection. It just is where it's at, and so that I find that to be amusing on a huge level to me. And so that's why I think about it all the time, because I'm like, how did this happen? Where did this go? This is really funny. Like, how would you have somebody who's so anathema to the culture that I grew up with? Maybe things have changed in the evangelical culture. I don't know. I'm not a part of it anymore. But it's just so they wouldn't even vote for Romney because he was a Mormon and not a Christian. So yeah. So it's funny. Sorry about that. That was my phone.
Well, one thing, so I think we sort of have reached the conclusion of my story,
right.
But we haven't discussed and we won't do it today.
Right.
We haven't discussed how all this has influenced my writing, but I think maybe we'll get to the writing aspect after we explore your story. Great. So next time, which won't be, it'll be after I come back from Frankfurt Book Fair. So in a couple weeks. Yeah. We'll start working on yours, which is an entirely different story.
It is.
Even though we grew up
similarities, but it is very. All right.
Yeah. All right.
You guys. And,
or 2 weeks.
Yeah. Yep. Read our book, even though it has nothing to do with this. Broken Circle. All right. Thanks. Bye.